What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Toge Lab. Today we're going to be replacing our clutch on the S13 Rocket Bunny. And what we're doing here first is we are removing the top bolts that are holding the bell housing to the engine. Next, we're going to remove the two bolts holding the clutch slave cylinder to the bell housing and remove the remaining bolts off the bell housing holding it to the engine. There are also two bolts holding the starter to the bell housing on the passenger side on a left-hand drive car. Once we have all that removed, we can go ahead and let all the fluid out of the transmission. Next, to remove the drive shaft, we're going to remove the four nuts holding the drive shaft to the rear differential. Next, we're going to remove the shifter. First, we're going to have to remove the trim piece and then remove the shift knob. Next, we're going to remove four 10mm bolts holding the shifter trim in place. And depending on what shifter you have, we have an aftermarket short shifter, so we have to use an Allen key to remove four additional bolts in order to pull the shifter out. With all the bolts removed, it should just pop right out. Next, we're going to remove the three plugs connecting the harness to the transmission. Finally, we're going to use the jack to hold up the transmission and remove the 4 bolts holding the transmission crossmember onto the chassis. Next, we're going to wiggle the transmission out. For a better view, I pulled the clutch out first. There are bolts holding all around the pressure plate, and then underneath the pressure plate is the clutch disc, and under that is our flywheel, which is held on by 8 bolts in the middle. As you can see, the front cover on our transmission has been leaking some transmission fluid, so we're going to go ahead and replace that as well. This should be pretty straightforward. We're going to remove the retaining clip and the fork should just pop right out, and then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts that are holding the front plate in place. Once you have that removed, you can go ahead and pop that off. I also removed the pivot ball because we're going to also be replacing that. With that removed, we're also going to replace the input shaft seal. With everything in place, we're going to go ahead and tighten up all the bolts and replace the pivot ball with a new one. Next, we're going to use a pry tool to pull out the old pilot bearing. Since we have the transmission out, now would be also a really good time to replace the rear main seal. We're going to go ahead and remove all the 10mm bolts holding the rear main seal cover plate onto the engine. There's quite a few of these, so make sure you remove all of them before you start prying. Now with that out of the car, we're going to remove the old one and insert the new rear main seal in there. We're also going to use some RTB to glue this back onto the car. The new clutch kit includes a new release bearing, a pilot bearing, as well as a guide tool that we're going to go ahead and use. With the fork, we are going to go ahead and pull off the old release bearing, and we are going to press in the new release bearing into place. With the new release bearing, we're going to go ahead and put back in the clutch fork as well as the release bearing and install the transmission. We are going to tap the new pilot bearing back into the crank. Once that's in place, we can go ahead and install the new flywheel with flywheel bolts. Make sure to torque these to spec, otherwise they may rattle out. We also use some red Loctite. With all the flywheel bolts torqued to spec and marked, we're going to install the clutch with the clutch alignment tool as well as the pressure plate. Here we are loosening the engine mounts to allow for a little bit more room and tilting the engine a little bit backwards to make it easier to install the transmission back in. Transmission back in. Now we're just going to go ahead and do everything in reverse. So we're going to tighten the transmission cross member bolts, the bolts holding the bell housing to the engine, installing the drive shaft back onto the car, as well as the shifter and all the harnesses that go to the transmission. Unfortunately, the camera ran out of battery, so I wasn't able to record the remaining of this install. But we're pretty much doing everything that we did in the beginning, except backwards and reinstalling everything. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.